Have you ever asked a woman, what's up? And she answered you, nothing, even though you knew for sure that something was happening. This is what I'm about to show you. At that moment, you witnessed neither confusion nor dishonesty. You witnessed the form of communication the most sophisticated human ever developed, and you simply didn't know about it language. What if we women had been speaking the clearest language of all of us, would have been listening with primitive ears to a communication advanced? I'll take you on a journey that will completely transform how you listen to every moment, every good, every answer that seems to say one thing, but means another. Because when we go back to that moment, when she said nothing, but you knew that it wasn't like that, you will realize that you were not witnessing a problem of communication. You were witnessing emotional genius in real time. Let's start by explaining why we have so wrong about this. He said he was fine, but his eyes said otherwise. Sound familiar? For generations, we've been sold the same old story. Women never say what they think. It's become a cultural gospel, whispered in boardrooms and shouted from stage comedy. He says nothing's wrong, but clearly something is. When he says okay, come out running. We've built entire relationship philosophies around this supposed female duplicity. But what if I told you that this isn't a story about women? What if it's a story about us and our profound inability to understand the language spoken before us noses? Psychology has provided us with a great deal of research that supports this myth. Studies show that women use communication more indirect, evasive questions like "it's not like that," and evasive language like "more or less." Robin Lakoff's pioneering work identified 10 characteristics linguistics supposedly exclusive to feminine speech: the tentative, the apologetic, and the unclear. We have documented, measured, and used it to confirm what we already believed. The evidence seems infallible. Women, they communicate differently. They use more emotional language, dialogue more focused on relationships and discursive strategies, more collaborative. When conflicts arise, research shows that women use what scholars call emotive language, while men prefer direct assertiveness. The pattern is undeniable, but this is where the story gets interesting and where most people stop investigating. And if these communication patterns weren't flaws to decipher, what if they weren't signs of confusion or manipulation? What if women weren't talking with a lack of clarity? What if we have been listening with the wrong ears? Because this is what the research reveals on deeper investigation. Women's indirect communication, it fulfills a precise psychological function. It is not about hiding meanings, but to preserve connection while navigating complex social realities that most of us cannot even imagine. We can't even see. You see, when he says well, he could be communicating something much more sophisticated than a simple emotional state. Could be saying, I'm managing multiple relationship dynamics, interpreting the underlying emotional currents that you have not noticed, and choosing harmony instead of confrontation, because I understand the social cost of direct conflict in ways you don't. That's not confusing communication. It's intelligence emotional in real time. We are about to embark on a journey that will completely transform your perception of every good, every maybe, every seemingly indirect answer. You will realize that the greatest mystery of communication is not what women mean when they don't say it. That's why we are so convinced that they don't mean it. Absolutely not what they say. The myth is about to collapse, and what we discover underneath will change it. Everything. Remember that good thing we started with? Let's find out what really is happening right now. While we obsess over whether women they say what they think, we have completely missed the deeper truth. They speak a completely different language. Different, not metaphorically, but literally a language that never we have bothered to learn. The psychology of communication reveals something extraordinary. Men and women have fundamentally different goals when speaking. Men often communicate to maintain their status or achieve goals. Specific, what researchers call rapport language. The women use the language of rapport, a communication designed to build relationships and create connections. Think of it this way. Imagine you speak Spanish fluently, but every conversation you have is judged by someone who only speaks English. Listen to your words, but don't grasp the meaning. Then conclude that you are a poor communicator. That's exactly what's happening when women use what linguists call evasiveness. Lexical phrases like more or less, you know, and well, do not show uncertainty. They show relational intelligence. They are not signs of weakness, are sophisticated tools for maintaining social harmony while still expressing your opinions. Consider the tag questions. That's pretty cool, isn't it? We've tagged this as a search for validation. But ethnographic research on communication shows that it is actually an invitation to dialogue. I mean, I have an opinion and I value yours too. That's not indecision, is emotional intelligence in action. This is where it gets fascinating. This communication style, it fulfills a crucial psychological function called relationship maintenance. Women perform what researchers call emotional labor, the invisible work of managing interpersonal dynamics, calming tensions, and ensuring team cohesion group. Each type of rising tone, each softened statement, is actually sophisticated social engineering. She is reading the environment, managing multiple relationship dynamics simultaneously, and communicating in a way that preserves connection while still expressing your authentic thoughts. But here's the trick. This emotional work is so invisible that we have confused with confusion. We have interpreted intelligence emotional as emotional instability. We have labeled relational wisdom as relational dishonesty when he says he could well be communicating. I decide to manage this conflict in a way that preserves our long-term relationship, although I might express my frustration more directly right now. That's not avoiding the truth, but express a deeper truth about human connection that most people never learn. The research is very clear. Women's communication patterns are not defective versions of male communication. They are completely different systems, optimized to achieve completely different results, and we have been judging one system by the rules of another. So the question is not whether the women speak their minds. The question is, are we finally ready to learn the language that I've been talking about all this time? Because what we are about to discover will transform not only the way in which you listen to women, but also the way you understand the very nature of human connection. You've experienced it firsthand, right? You've seen the women in your life change their communication style, and you've asked if you're dealing with the same person your wife says, it's fine when you forget to buy your groceries, but when you forget to pick up your daughter from school, his voice comes over the phone. This is over now. We need to talk. Tonight. Your daughter silently accepts that her classmates make fun of her clothes, but when those same children begin to make fun of her younger brother, she becomes a fierce protector. Leave him alone, or you'll have to deal with me. This is what psychology reveals. It's not just a matter of mood swings. Women channel what psychologists call archetypal energies, 7 distinctive patterns of feminine expression that have existed throughout history, cultures, throughout human history. Think of it this way. Every woman, it has 7 different modes that you can switch between as if changing radio station. Each mode makes it communicate in a completely different way. The mother mode focuses on protect and care for. When he asks, "Are you sure?" Component placement no doubts you. She worries that you might get hurt. Queen mode focuses on taking charge and commanding respect. Maiden is playful and curious and always asks, "What if we tried something new?" The hunter mode is fierce and independent, makes decisions quickly, and stands firm. The wise way is the wise teacher who shares lessons through stories and gentle guidance. The mystical mode is expressed with feelings and intuition, saying things like, "Something doesn't fit with this." And the lover mode focuses on connection and passion, seeking a deeper, meaning deep and intimate. And the most curious thing is that the great changes in life automatically activate these switches. When a woman becomes a mother, it's as if someone has turned up the volume on her mother mode. When you reach menopause, suddenly your wise mode intensifies and you start to give advice she's never given before. The same woman who says, "I'm worried about us," could mean totally different things. In mother mode, she wants to fix and protect the relationship. In lover mode, look for more romance and connection. In mystic, feels that something deeper is wrong. Identical words, completely different conversations, but this is what we've been doing wrong. We call it confusing. We say it exaggerates when it gets into mother, who is bossy when she dominates the queen mode, or who is unrealistic when a mystical mode begins to speak of feelings. We have been dealing with this system natural change as if it were a problem that needs a solution. Sometimes these modes even fight each other inside her head. The maiden who longs for freedom fights with the mother who wants to protect everyone. When that happens, your words may sound confusing, but it is not confusion. There are different parts of her arguing, and we only heard one version. Do you remember that good thing from the beginning? It could be the mother mode, keeping the peace. The mode queen, staying dignified. Wise mode, knowing you need to figure some things out for yourself. Or hunter mode, deciding that this battle is not worth his energy. The same word, 7 possible meanings. We just never knew how to distinguish them. Now that you understand the 7 ways women operate, here's the devastating truth. Most of these modes have been systematically silenced. Imagine this. You're in a foreign country, where only men can speak the official language in public. Women can think in their own language, maternal, but when they need to communicate important ideas, they must translate everything through a language designed by and for men. Some thoughts they simply cannot be translated, others lose their meaning completely. This is not a metaphor. It's exactly what has been happening with female communication for centuries. This is no coincidence. Communication researchers call it the silenced group theory. Here's how it works. Imagine a company where all the rules of professional communication were written by people who are naturally loud, interrupt frequently, and never ask questions. Now, let's imagine a group of employees speaking naturally in low voices, listening attentively, and asking thoughtful questions before making decisions. When it comes time for review, guess what communication style is labeled as ideal for leadership and which is lacking confidence? The system does not evaluate whether the communication is good or bad, but rather measures its similarity to those who wrote the rules. Think about it. Who decided that interrupting means leadership? Who determined that raising your voice equals authority? Who created the rule that is emotional intelligence somehow less valuable than cold data? This is what decades have shown. Of research, women's natural communication styles, questions that build relationships, the collaborative language, intuitive perceptions. They were not rejected for being ineffective, but because they threaten the existing power structure. Your wife telling you, "I'm fine," when you forgot to pick up your daughter. That it is not evasion, but centuries of training, because women learned that the protective anger of the mother mode labels them as hysterical. The moral authority of the mode reigns, becomes bossy. The hunches of the mystical mode are dismissed as irrational, so they adapted. They learned to communicate their truth in ways that activate the system designed to silence them. Imagine growing up as a child and noticing something weird. Your mom never tells you to just take out the trash, otherwise you could take out the garbage when you can. Your teacher says, "I'm sorry, but I think this answer could be wrong." Instead of simply saying this is wrong, your boss takes forever to explain something simple. Why? Because when women speak directly, they're called mean or bossy. But when men talk the same way, they call them strong leaders. The genius of this silencing system lies in that it didn't need to be obvious. Women weren't forbidden to speak. They were simply made to understand that if they spoke authentically, they would not be heard properly, or worse still, would be punished for it. And then we had the audacity to call their communication adapted, confusing, or indirect. But here's the twist that changes everything. The women who developed in this system not only survived but mastered it. They developed such sophisticated communication strategies that they were able to speak their truth while protected them from the consequences. You're about to discover how they did it and why their communication confusing is actually an emotional stroke of genius. So the women were faced with an impossible choice. Speak authentically and face the consequences, or adapt your communication and be misinterpreted. What they created in response was not confusion, but ingenuity. Let's imagine back to Sarah, the woman we met earlier. When her boss passed her over for a promotion, she didn't say, "I'm fine," because was confused with her feelings. He said it because he was calculating. In 0.3 seconds, his brain ran this algorithm. If I express my true anger, I will be labeled as emotional and will harm my future opportunities. If I stay silent, I preserve relationships while I think about my next strategy. That's not indecision. It's emotional intelligence operating at superhuman levels. Researchers at psychology calls this self-protective communication, and it reveals something profound. What we have called indirect communication is actually a real-time risk assessment. In every word they say, think about the psychological weight of this. Imagine that every conversation will force you to calculate instantly. My answer will be heard correctly. Natural. It will damage relationships, cost me opportunities. Now imagine doing this calculation thousands of times a day for decades. Your colleague, who remains silent in the face of unfair treatment, isn't weak. He's running complex social algorithms that most people don't even see. It's weighing the emotional effort of maintaining team harmony against the personal cost of speaking up. She is considering how her words will affect not only herself, but the entire network of relationships that he manages. When he finally gives that devastating feedback, it's not because you suddenly found the courage. It's because your calculations finally aligned themselves. The situation became so serious that the risk of keeping silent outweighed the risk of telling the truth. This is what's heartbreaking. This constant calculation creates what researchers call fragmentation of authenticity. Women become fragmented. Their real selves, their displayed selves, and their they think others want to see, all to navigate a communication system that punishes their expression. Natural, but here's the twist that changes everything. This adaptation created something extraordinary. Women developed communication superpowers. They can read micro-expressions, managing multiple emotional currents simultaneously and transmitting complex messages through subtle signals that direct communicators. They completely overlook that good, to which we return again and again. It is not a simple word. It is a data package that contains layers of information about the emotional state, the dynamics of relationships, future intentions, and social context. It doesn't hide a meaning. It communicates in a language so sophisticated that we never learn to decipher it. The real question isn't why women don't speak their minds. It's why we've been listening so rudely to such an advanced communication. Then, something changed, something that would expose everything this system and would demonstrate once and for all that communication between women weren't the problem, but our understanding of them. The networks arrived social. Suddenly, women had platforms where they could communicate without interruptions, without being labeled by their tone of voice, without anyone deciding that their collaborative questions implied uncertainty. For the first time in human history, women could express their archetypal voices at full volume. And what happened? The explosion of creativity was astonishing. Women didn't become clearer communicators. They revealed that they had always been clear. We just hadn't been listening closely enough. Watch a woman build a community on Instagram. Use her pure mom mode. Cultivate connections. Ask how are you? And create safe spaces for vulnerable conversations. On LinkedIn, the same woman becomes a queen, publishing authoritative opinions that inspire the respect of thousands of people. Followers. On TikTok, her mystical mode shares intuitive wisdom that transforms the lives of millions of people. 7 different platforms, 7 archetypal expressions different, a brilliantly clear communicator. But here's where it gets fascinating. Even in the digital spaces, old patterns of silencing attempted to reassert themselves. Women faced new pressures. The perfect life on Instagram, the careful tone in LinkedIn, the constant threat of harassment for speaking too boldly. Half changed, but the old harmony between authentic expression and social consequences remained. Research shows something remarkable. When women communicate in writing, text messages, emails, social media posts, the gender communication gap practically disappears. Why what? Because written communication eliminates the immediate social penalties that shaped centuries of verbal adaptation. Your wife's text message saying, "We can talk this evening," is not vague. It is a very clear communication through a medium in which she can speak directly without calculating facial expressions, tone of voice, or reactions, immediate social interactions. But artificial intelligence is about to change the rules of the game completely. AI systems are being trained, to recognize patterns, communication, emotional intelligence, and relational dynamics. The same skills that women have mastered for centuries while I told them they didn't communicate clearly. Imagine AI systems capable of detect the sophisticated emotional algorithms that your partner executes before speaking in meetings. Imagine technology that recognizes the work of maintaining relationships that her mother does in every family conversation. What will happen? When machines confirm that women's confusing communication is social intelligence really advanced. The digital revolution isn't changing the way women communicate. It's finally giving us the tools to see how sophisticated has always been their communication. And that brings us to the most important question of all. What will happen when the next generation grows up with these tools? And now we come to the most revolutionary part of this story. The generation that is rewriting everything. Meet the women of Generation Z. They grew up with the digital tools we just mentioned, and something extraordinary happened. Never they learned to silence their archetypal voices. Watch a 20-year-old woman communicate today. Go from being a mother supporting her friend during a breakup to being queen denouncing injustice in a viral TikTok, already being a mystic. Sharing her experience with mental health. All in one day, without apologize, with amazing clarity. He doesn't say, "I'm fine when you're not, I'm dealing with anxiety today and need space to process it." He doesn't soften his authority with questions. When he knows something, he says it directly. This approach won't work. And here I explain why. What changed? He never knew that his natural archetypal communication was incorrect. But this is what's fascinating. This generational shift reveals something profound about those previous generations that confuse. Generation Z women don't communicate better. They communicate better, with less interference from the silencing system we have been discovering. Your mother's generation learned to say, "I'm okay," because the direct expression of need entailed social consequences. Your daughter's generation says, "I need support right now," because they grew up in spaces digital where authentic expression was rewarded, not punished. The same archetypal wisdom, different level of permission to express it. Research shows that younger generations have higher emotional intelligence, more sophisticated relational skills, and communication patterns clearer. However, they're not more emotionally evolved. They simply thrive in an environment that doesn't punish their natural archetypal voices. This is creating what psychologists call the evolution of real-time communication. For the first time in centuries, we can see how women communicate when they are not filtered by systems designed to silence them, and the results are impressive. When women can express their archetypal voices without penalty, they do not become confusing or indirect. They become precisely what have always been under the adaptive layers, incredibly sophisticated communicators, capable of navigate emotional complexity, build authentic relationships, and lead with authority and empathy. Old patterns are not disappearing, they're finally being expressed in all their power, which brings us back to where we started. Remember that moment when he said, "I'm fine," and her eyes told a different story. Now you have the keys to decipher what was really happening. I wasn't being confusing, I wasn't hiding what he meant. He spoke in the most sophisticated language of communication that humans have ever developed, and we just didn't know how to listen. Remember when we started? You asked a woman, "What's wrong?" And she replied, "Nothing." But you knew that something was happening. Now you understand what was really happening at that moment. His brain ran a sophisticated emotional algorithm in 0.3 seconds, calculating the security of the relationship, the dynamics of time, and archetypal responses. He didn't hide the meaning. He communicated with the most advanced emotional language humans have ever seen, ever developed. Its nothingness contained layers of data on trust, processing needs, and protective wisdom that your question couldn't even access. The story she saw was not a contradiction, but the complete context of which means nothing when expressed in the ancient language of the emotional intelligence. Every woman in your life, your mother, your partner, your daughter, your colleague, has been speaking this sophisticated language while we judged it as confusion. The practical implications are amazing. Relationships transform when you stop trying to figure out the problems and start recognizing genius. Workplaces evolve when intelligence is valued, collaborative along with assertive communication. This revelation extends to everything, leadership to technology to the very future of human connection. So here's the question that only makes sense now that you've completed this journey. If confusing communication of women is actually emotional dominance, what other human behaviors have we misinterpreted for complete? Are you ready?